As the war in Ukraine enters its second month, Vladimir Putin is a very desperate man, and that has got Joe Biden and his friends a bit anxious. Because as Ukraine continues to frustrate Russia with its dogged resistance, Vladimir Putin may be forced to turn to the more devastating weapons in Russia's arsenal. There are three kinds of these weapons: chemical weapons, biological weapons, or nuclear weapons. Now, America's contingency plan hinges upon what to do if Putin employs any of these weapons in his arsenal. So it has come up with a team which is being dubbed as the Tiger Team. It consists of some of the top security officials in the Pentagon and in the White House, and they meet thrice a week under very classified circumstances here. Their job is to come up with contingency plans for each of the following three scenarios, which they believe could be Vladimir Putin's next option. Number one, Russia attacks other allies of NATO directly, such as Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, even Poland. Number two is that Russia attacks other neighbors of Ukraine which are not members of the European Union or members of NATO yet, but like Ukraine have a desire to move further west. Countries such as Georgia, countries such as Moldova. And number three is if Putin decides to employ any weapon of mass destruction, which could be chemical, biological, or nuclear, as we discussed earlier. Now, a direct attack by Russia on any NATO member will elicit a very simple and a direct response, because that would include enacting Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which says that an attack on any NATO ally is an attack on the entire alliance and they are bound to retaliate. And now that attack can also be in the form of a nuclear attack, even if the attack is within Ukraine. But what if Russia decides to attack other non-NATO allies in an attempt to bully them into submission, as Vladimir Putin is trying to do for the past month with Volodymyr Zelensky? That is a question which Joe Biden and his other allies will have to decide at a top-secret NATO meeting that's happening at Brussels. Now, a use of any weapon of mass destruction which also impacts other member nations is also cause for NATO to jump into military action, because while the target might be in Ukraine, the spillover effects of any chemical, any biological, or any radioactive attack may also cross borders into other nations which may be members of NATO or maybe allies of the West. But what if Putin smartly decides to employ a tactical nuclear weapon, in which he uses a relatively small nuclear strike to ensure that there is no lasting damage beyond Ukraine's borders, but the strike still is devastating enough to force Zelensky and the rest of the Ukrainian government into negotiations, possibly even surrender? What does the West, what does NATO do then? That is a question which still we do not have any answers to. So far, the measures suggested by the Tiger Team, which involve deep sanctions against Russia, a heavy military buildup in NATO allies and NATO members around Ukraine, and heavily militarizing Ukraine's forces against Russian attacks, has so far worked wonders, because it's got Vladimir Putin frustrated and it has completely crippled the Russian economy. But a desperate man such as Vladimir Putin may resort to desperate measures, and that may require even more desperate countermeasures by the West, and that is what the world is very fascinatedly watching.